Hi, so welcome to the first of the professor videos to accompany the Genesis readings. And I'm going to start off each video just kind of walking my way through the chapter PowerPoints and highlighting important things that you need to know, and then go right into the biblical readings. So let's do that. I'm going to share my screen here. And here we are in the first of the PowerPoints, right? Let me just make it bigger. These are all, as you noticed from the introductory video, these are all under the Modules tab, and there's one that's called Our PowerPoints, and they're PowerPoints that accompany each of the chapters that are assigned in the syllabus. So let me just take a moment to go through this first one. I'm assuming you've already read chapter 1 of the Howard textbook, and you can kind of use this as an outline or a guide as you progress through the chapters. Okay, so chapter 1, basically it just goes over why you study the Bible, what are the main themes of the Bibles, both the Old and the New Testament, what's the background to it, what are the different sections. So it's kind of like an introductory chapter as to just what is the Bible. Okay, so it talks about why it's important to study the Bible. It is fundamental to 3 of the Abrahamic faiths: Judaism, Christianity, and frankly Islam, because Muhammad was familiar with the Bible. Why do you do it? Because so many of the things in our society have its roots in biblical interpretation or biblical law, or at least people's understanding of things in the Bible. Most of them somewhat fairly incorrect, but it's good to be familiar with what people are talking about in terms of their position. What are the 3 worlds? The textbook is outlined in such a way that they like to look at the contemporary world. How does this Bible fit into our world? What's the literary world? Let's take a look at the text and the language and the meter and the poetry, etc. And then the historical world, which really is our focus. What is the context out of which the Bible comes out? So if you notice in the PowerPoint, I said I will probably be skipping much of the literary world sections, and I'll let you know in the syllabus and on the PowerPoints what pages you should skip, because we're also not covering everything in the Bible as well. So just pay close attention to the syllabus in terms of what chapters I'm assigning and what parts of the chapter. And always read the summaries of the chapters at the end. It's only a couple of paragraphs, and it basically gives you a nice outline of what you should be, what the whole chapter is about. Okay? All right. So it talks about where the word Bible comes from, the fact that the Old Testament is also called by Jews the Tanakh, because it's from the 3 sections of the Hebrew Bible: the Torah, the Nevi'im, and the Ketuvim. These are 3 Hebrew words meaning law, prophets, and writings. And so if you take T and K, that means the Old Testament is called the Tanakh by Jews. Okay? Old Testament is usually what Christians call it, and then in terms of ordering, how the texts are ordered or the books of the Old Testament are ordered, it's different depending on the Jewish Bible, which is the Tanakh, and the Christian Bible and how they organize their Old Testament. In terms of the Hebrew Bible or the Tanakh or the Old Testament, the first 9 books, organize the creation of the universe by God, the rise and fall of Israel, and then you have a bunch of prophets, latter prophets, and then writings. So it's the Torah, which are the first 5 books of the Bible, the Ketubim, which are from Joshua to 2 Kings, which is the rise and fall of Israel, and then and also includes the prophets. And then there's the Ketubim, or the writings, which is everything else. In terms of the New Testament, the overview is that there are 4 Gospels in order of earliest to latest: Mark, Matthew, Luke, and John. And Matthew, Mark, and Luke are called the Synoptic Gospels because they have symmetry, or they're synonymous, meaning they have a lot in common. Each gospel is a story of the life of Christ, and the Passion story is actually the last week of his life. So when we get to that, we'll go over that in a little bit more detail. There are some central themes of the Bible that Hauer outlines. Obviously, the key is God's relationship with humanity. And that can be represented through the line of Abraham or through the line of Moses or David or, frankly, Jesus, right? And the idea of that special covenantal relationship where we're bound to God through a contract or a covenant. So we'll also be going over that a little bit more. And, please make sure that you read the PowerPoint. Some more central themes of the Bible. In terms of the historical world, Howard gives you a description about how it was put together in the different languages, and how they basically reconstructed it. It wasn't written by one man, wasn't written by Moses, wasn't written by God. Inspired by God, sure, but not written. It was really a compilation of a variety of editors. The Old Testament being the four editors, J, E, D, and P, and the New Testament being the four editors of the four Gospels, plus the Pauline letters and some additional people. So really, it was like a bunch of people, mostly men, that edited and compiled all the material together. Okay. Canonization means how did this become the standard text, right, for the religion? So there's a discussion in Hauer about that. History of the translation of the Bible into English. I cut out most of it. I don't think you need to know how it became, into its final form, but I did keep some key things in terms of what people call God in the Old Testament. So Elohim and Yahweh. I also cut out a lot of the history of the interpretation of the Bible, which is a lot of chapter 2, which you don't have to read, and just kind of how did it come across that it was divided into the two, the Old and the New Testament, and how the New Testament was the primary, most important part of the Bible for Christians. So let's close that text and actually go to the next PowerPoint, which focuses on the book of Genesis, which I want to go over in terms of the chapters that we assigned. Now, in Genesis, I had assigned Genesis 1 through 11, and then Genesis 12, which focuses on just Abraham and the line of Abraham and the covenant that God makes with him. So 1 through 11 is actually called prehistory. That means there's no proof that any of it really happened. There was no flood that eliminated everything in the world. The world did not begin 3,000 years ago with two people in a garden in, Iraq. So all of those things are kind of slanted more towards myth than history. That's why it's called prehistory or primeval history. Once you begin with Abraham in Genesis 12 and then his succeeding children, Isaac, and then Isaac's son Jacob, and then Jacob's son Joseph and his 11 brothers, we don't know if those people existed, but we certainly know that people like them existed. So we can say, starting with the line of Abraham, which is approximately 1800 BCE, we do believe that those people did exist, that they did form some sort of relationship with God. They had some sort of covenantal, and they did traverse, between Canaan or Israel into Egypt and back and forth, that those people did exist. Before Genesis 12, unfortunately, those things are just not proven historically. Okay, so if we take a look at Genesis 1 through 3, you'll notice that there are two stories here, right? One of them is Genesis 1, which is from the source P. Hauer has a description and a discussion about the four sources, J, E, D, and P. So please take a look at that so you know who P is and what kind of themes that P has. Source P, which stands for the priestly writer, is responsible for Genesis 1. Source P tends to be very organized. There's a certain order and repeated language. It was the first day and it was good. God tends to be a bit removed from the action. It's just kind of placing things in order. And the culmination of that creation story in Genesis 1 is the creation of humanity, male and female, both at the same time. Okay, there's no hierarchy. Adam isn't better and first. It's just humans were created. They had dominion over the world. The end. So we can actually take a look at that story here. In the beginning, there was not even a sun or even the notion of day. So you'll have no sun or moon, no notion of day. It was just a formless void in the darkness. And then God made the idea of light and darkness, and or even the idea of time, which is the first day. Then he makes I'm saying he because God is definitely depicted as a male in the Bible because it's written by a bunch of men. As we know, God obviously is not defined by a gender, but in the Bible, definitely God is regarded as he. Okay. He says, let there be a dome in the midst of the water, and let it separate the waters from the waters, meaning that the ancient people's understanding of what the sky was that it was water, that it was just a dome or kind of like a thin saran wrap thing separating the waters from above. I mean, if you were to look at the sky, it looks like water, right? Separating the waters from above from the waters below, the oceans and the seas around you. So the ancient understanding of this creation was that at any given point, if God was mad enough, he could just poke a hole in the sky and let all that water come down, which eventually happens in the mythical or the, flood of the whole world when God actually just floods everything by poking a hole in that ceiling and letting all that water in. So whenever they had either no water or they had rain and for a really long time, they were always wondering, is God mad at us? Right? Why isn't he allowing that water to come? Or why is there so much? So just keep in mind that they were always kind of thinking that their life is tenuous at that point. So so then he made the earth and the sky, and then he puts the stars in the sky, and you notice that let them be for signs and for seasons and for days and years in verse 14. They had clearly an understanding about astrology and astronomy and the placement of the different, constellations and the North Star. So they knew about fixed points in the sky and how it changes, depending on what season. Then the greater light to rule the day, which is the sun, lesser light to rule the night, and then the stars. All right, so he creates the notion of light and darkness to indicate day at the beginning, and then later on, not until, verse 15, does he actually create the sun and the moon. Then he says, let the bring animals, and at the very end, God created humankind in his image, male and female, at the same time. There's no inequality or hierarchy here. That's it. They have dominion. The end, right? Then, all of a sudden, chapter 2 and 3, we have another creation story, which shows that the writers had enough respect for us readers to determine for ourselves which one would be the more valid. So this one, he makes Adam first, realizes, and he also says, don't eat from any, you can eat from any tree of the garden, including the tree of life, but don't eat from the tree of knowledge of good and evil, or you will die. Then he notices that he's kind of lonely, so he tries to create a helper from all the animals, that he's creating, and the guy's like, no, I don't want any of it. So he creates a woman, right, to be a helper. Helper not by, like a subordinate, but a helper as in a companion. Then, of course, the famous story of the serpent. The serpent is not evil. The serpent is not Satan. The serpent is just craftier or smarter. So these are things that Christianity teaches about this story, but it's not in the story. It's not true. Satan is not in this story. So the serpent is just like any other animal, just smarter. So he challenges them and says, hey, I don't think that's going to happen. I don't think you're going to die, which is actually true. And he says, if you eat of it, you're just going to be like God, knowing good and evil. So they eat of it. And both of them are culpable, by the way, both Adam and Eve, not just Eve. Adam and Eve both ate of the fruit. They're both at fault. They ate it, and the serpent was right. God was lying, and the serpent was right. They did have knowledge of good and evil, and they didn't die. And as a result, of this, because God didn't want them to eat of the tree of life as well, if you notice, become one of